Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here, and in today's video I want to talk about what I believe to be a pivotal point in the Battlefield 6 saga, if you will. Playtesting of this game is about to begin, and there will almost certainly be leaks, and based on what people see, hear, and maybe even are lucky enough to experience for themselves, that could set the entire trajectory of success, or indeed failure, for the next Battlefield game. So without further ado, if you guys do enjoy the content here on the channel, make sure you're subbed up so you don't miss out on any future Battlefield videos. Plenty more to come as we get closer to the release, and I will be covering all of the news here on this channel. So, as we all know, playtesting begins this week with multiple sources already stating that it's going to be on Friday, the 7th of March from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 6 o'clock. So not a particularly long playtest here, it's only going to be the one day and only for a couple of hours. Now it is true that those tests are under NDA, and so what that means is that the people who partake in those tests shouldn't be talking about them and certainly shouldn't be showing footage from those tests. But I firmly believe that EA are fully expecting people to leak their experiences. So this, of course, isn't the very first playtest they've done on the new Battlefield game. They've been doing local playtesting both over in Sweden, in Stockholm, and in Guildford in the UK and other DICE offices around the world. But those are very different situations where you don't just sign a boilerplate NDA, which, let's face it, most people who playtest online aren't really going to read it from start to finish. They're just going to click accept like most people do with these things, and they're not going to worry about it too much. They'll just be told, don't leak it. But when you actually go to the studio and playtest in person, the NDA is probably much more inclusive, and at the end of the day, it's going to be far easier for DICE to actually track you down if you're one of very few people who playtested, if somebody does indeed leak something. But whilst this playtest on Friday isn't huge, we're still talking about hundreds, if not thousands of players here. There is really nothing stopping people from going onto Reddit, putting down their thoughts on paper and sharing their experiences. And I firmly believe that EA are fully expecting people to actually leak those experiences. Now, why would EA possibly want that? Well, for one thing, it creates hype, right? It keeps the discussion around the game going, it keeps the community engaged, plus they also get the direct feedback from the people testing the game, and maybe even they get a bit of indirect feedback from people just reacting online to leaks and things that they've seen. Now, what this also signals to me is that EA and DICE feel quite proud of whatever product they have here in the next Battlefield game, because like I said, this could be a make it or break it moment. If the people who playtest the game take to Reddit and start leaking their experiences and saying things like, this just really isn't it, there's no promise in this next Battlefield game, it's worse than Battlefield 2042 or something along those lines, that is really going to sour the current sentiment, I guess, in the Battlefield community. Any hype will be lost. And so for DICE and EA to come out with a product that, I mean, we're not expecting it to be finished at this point or polished in any way, but I think the important thing is that the gameplay loop is fun and enjoyable and it shows promise. And if they come out with something like that, and the people who test these things then go online and maybe some of them decide to leak things, and they maybe say something more along the lines of, I had an absolute blast playing the next Battlefield game. I only got to playtest it for 2 hours, but I wished I could have continued on for more. Well, you know what that's going to do? That's going to drive more interest about it, maybe even more pre-orders and things of that nature down the line, even though I would strongly recommend you don't pre-order the next game. I know some people are just going to say, hey Ghost, I don't care what you say, mate. Either way, I'm going to pre-order it, and that's fine. You guys, of course, make your own decisions. But all I'm saying is maybe we shouldn't be throwing, any more money at EA prematurely than is absolutely necessary. So this is a pretty clear sign to me in DICE and EA's confidence in the game. Like, you can't tell me that DICE and EA are that gullible to think that they can allow thousands of random people to playtest their game, and just because they sign an NDA and they agree that they won't leak it, that they're not going to leak it. Like, of course they know 110% that things are going to get leaked. Now, it may not be gameplay, because the way these things usually work is that they will have watermarks bouncing all over the screen, so unless you want to go through the painstaking editing of blacking out all of those watermarks so that you won't get banned, or maybe you just don't care if you get banned from the next playtest, we're not going to see any gameplay footage. On top of that, if any gameplay footage does surface, I would expect it to be taken down rather promptly by EA, so it won't be around for too long anyway. But written things definitely will be there, and once we start getting a few leaks, we'll be able to corroborate people's stories together and basically put the pieces together and realize, okay, yes, these people aren't making this up. They clearly have actually playtested the game and they're telling the truth here. And to be honest with you guys, gaming companies have been doing this for years. Whenever something supposedly leaks, it's essentially a PR marketing move a lot of the time from companies in order to build hype around the game. Just look at all of the alphas out there, all of the beta tests. Much of the time, they're not true alpha beta tests, they're just marketing betas or marketing alphas even at some points. And I do think with Battlefield Labs, we are going to be testing things, giving feedback, and that is certainly going to help them build the next game, but I think it's just as much about marketing as anything else. After all, they have now created an environment where people are like literally chomping at the bit to get into one of these playtests. And we've already seen, right, there's been, what, over 1.5 million signups for this thing? So that already tells you that the vast majority of people are never going to get to playtest the next Battlefield game, and they're not going to get to play it until it comes out. So all of those people who don't get to playtest are going to be scouring the internet, waiting in the wings to hear some information about the game. Is it good? Is Battlefield finally back to form, or is it going to be another failure? So this weekend is going to be a very telling time. Like, I will literally eat my hat, my proverbial hat, because I'm not a hat guy, if we don't get a single leak this weekend by the time the weekend is done from the latest playtest. So in terms of what I expect to hear, I expect it to be a pretty limited test, maybe one map, one game mode, not even necessarily vehicles. They may only be testing out like the class system or the infantry play, so it's not a given that we're going to hear anything about the vehicles, because of course I know that's a big pain point for Battlefield 2042. Vehicles just really weren't that great there. So whatever we possibly do here is going to be somewhat limited, but the thing I really want to hear is just that the game feels good to play. That is really what it comes down to. It just has to feel good and show promise. All of the other stuff can be worked on and iterated upon, but if you don't have that like Battlefield feeling there, if the running isn't correct, if the weapon sounds aren't good, if the gunplay is bad and the feeling of shooting somebody isn't satisfying, I think those are all the beats that they really have to be hitting right now. Other things like weapon balancing and map design, game modes, those things are far easier to change. Of course, like, I'd like to hope that they have most of the maps already made and that they're pretty decent, but that's the feedback that I'm personally really looking out for. So this time around, it seems that EA are sticking to a more showing us rather than telling us approach, where they're going back to the traditional class system, going back to 64 players, going back to a more traditional, authentic, modern war scenario. Only this time, they're actually prepared to peel the curtain back and let a lot of us into the game to see it for ourselves. Whereas, of course, typically with previous games, they've made promise after promise after promise. They talked about Battlefield 2042, taking the best things from Battlefield 3 and 4 and putting a nice twist on it.
And then we got to this thing that we called 2042, and we all looked at that, piece, and kind of looked around the room, and we just kind of felt it in here. We found it. It was this kind of special moment of taking the best pieces of Battlefield 3 and 4, that notion of like modern warfare, and then spicing it up a bit with cutting-edge hardware.
And that game didn't exactly turn out to be the one that we all expected, did it? So this time, it's nice to see them actually sort of putting their money where their mouth is and showing it to us instead of just saying it, because I think they know that if they just tell us, we're not really going to believe them. They have to show us. So I really am crossing my fingers that the feedback that they get and whatever surfaces online is of the positive variety, because I mean, like I say, if people try it out and they really do not like it, that is not going to bode well for community sentiment, it's not going to bode well for DICE, and it's certainly not going to bode well for EA. Leave me a comment down below, guys, and let me know what are you expecting to hear, if anything, about this upcoming Battlefield test. Is there any specific part of the game that you want to hear about? Like, say you're speaking to somebody who's in the playtest. What questions would you ask them? Maybe leave those down below. I think my question would certainly be, how do the air vehicles feel to handle. As always, thank you guys so much for watching the video today. Have a good one, and I'll see you guys next time.